Welcome back to the Advanced Excel class. My name is Trisha Jaktiani, and in this tutorial, I will introduce you to the pivot tables. A pivot table is a great tool in Excel which helps you to summarize data in Excel. Let's see in our example sheet. Here we have a table with the sales record where we can see the place where the order has been placed or where the product has been sold, the name of the product, the customer name, the order date when this order was placed, the sales channel through which the order has been placed, quantity of the product, and the revenue that we have earned by selling these products. And as you scroll down, you can see rows and rows of data. Now, if I want to summarize this data into a small table, I can definitely use the formulas or the functions to summarize them. But with a pivot table, it will just be a few clicks to get your desired summarized data. So here, in order to create a pivot table, I will have to go select my data or stay inside my database and then click on Insert tab. However, before I even start that, I need to ensure that my data is in a particular order or is organized in a particular manner. So what are those rules? The first rule is that your database first column cannot be blank. That means everything should be available, or some data has to be available in each cell of your first column in the database. It cannot have a blank cell in the first column. Anywhere else, any other column can have a few blank cells, but the first column cannot. Second rule is that your headers, which is the first row, cannot be blank either. So Excel should see all the headers available. If there is any blank or there is no header in one of the column, your pivot table will give you an error and it will not work. So now that we are sure about the data is in a particular order and organized in a particular manner, I can start by creating a pivot table. Now stay inside the database by keeping my cursor in any cell on the database and click on pivot table. Once I do that, there are two things that I'll have to give in the pivot table wizard. One is from which I want to create the pivot table, that range I have to give. But because I had kept my cursor in the data, the range has already been picked up. Next is where do you want to place this pivot table report? Now, either I can select new worksheet or the existing worksheet. New worksheet is when you're creating the pivot table and you want to place it in a new worksheet. That is when you will select the new worksheet. However, existing worksheet you will select when you want to place your pivot table in any of the worksheets that is available for you in the workbook. Here we only have one worksheet, but if you had more worksheet, you can select any of this and then go on to existing worksheet, select the location where you want to place the pivot table and click on OK. However, I prefer a new worksheet, reason being you get more space to work or play with your pivot table. So I'll select the new worksheet and then ensure that add this data to the data model is not ticked. That means it should be unticked. In my case, it was already ticked, so I'll remove the tick from there. Add this data to the data model will only be available in 2013 or higher versions. Now I'll click on OK. As soon as I click on OK, you will see that a new sheet has been placed in your data in your workbook, and your pivot table report is placed on the left hand side, and on the right hand side you can see the pivot table field list where you can see all the headers which is there in your database can be seen in your pivot table field list here. Now these fields are the fields that we are going to place in these four quadrants to create your pivot table report. How do we place? Let's see that first. So we need to understand the four quadrants of your pivot table in order to create a pivot table report. The first quadrant is the filters, second is your columns, third is your rows, and fourth is the values. In 2010 or previous versions, you will see that the columns and the rows names are, or the columns and the rows quadrant names are column labels and row labels, but it is one and the same, only the name is little different. Now we will start with the last quadrant of this pivot table field list, and that is called your values. Values is the quadrant where you can do any calculations that you want to. For example, if I want to identify what is the total revenue that we have earned from the sales, I will be going on to the revenue table and doing a sum in our case. So for example, I'll do a sum, open the bracket, and then select the whole database, or sorry, the whole revenue column and press on. This is how we create a sum. However, if I want to do that in pivot table, I will go onto the pivot table, and under the field list that you can see on the top, I will drag and drop revenue to the values column. Another way to do that is right click on the revenue and then say add to the values. Once I do that, you will see that automatically Excel has identified that revenue contains the numeric data, and hence it is showing as the sum of revenue. So it is automatically totaled it up and showing you the sum of the revenue. Now let's move on to the next quadrant, which is the rows. So the rows is the quadrant where you can divide this sum of the revenue into different parts. For example, if I want to understand which country does the sum of the revenue belong. For example, if I want to divide the sum of the revenue as per the country. So if Africa is, in Africa, I'm doing this much revenue, and America, I'm doing a different revenue. So that kind of a division, if I want to do, I will select country or right click on country and add it to the row labels. What will happen is in the rows, you will see the names of the countries, and against that, you will see the sum of the revenue. So now what has happened is you are able to see the sum of the revenue. Now, like I had already mentioned, all kind of calculations will be done in the value section, but you can only see that it is showing as sum. Say if I want to change this sum to an average. If I want to do that, I will left click on the sum of revenue that I can see in the values quadrant and click on value field setting. Here you will see number of different calculation options that are available, like count, average, max, min, product. So all these options which are available, you can select from there that instead of only selecting the sum and get the result that you're looking for. For example, let's say I'm trying to do an average of the revenue earned in each country. So I'll select average and click on OK. You can see that now it is showing me the average of the revenue in each of the country. You can also change it to the, say, count. So I can select count, and it will now give me the count of the orders placed. It can also be something like max. So I'm trying to understand what is the highest revenue earned in these countries. So 3,28,060 is the highest revenue earned in Africa. So these are the things that you can do with your value field setting. That is, you can select the kind of calculation that you want to do depending on your requirement in the values. Like I said, on the rows, it is giving you the labels of the countries, and against that you can see the sum of the revenue. Similarly, you can also do the same with the columns. If I want to decide to put this country into the column, I can drag and drop to the columns, or from here I can left click on the country and say move it to the column labels. It will move to the column labels. Now your country is shown in the columns. However, it is not looking that user friendly because your columns are showing the data. However, if you move it to the rows, it looks much better and even easier to understand what is given here. Now, let's say if tomorrow my manager comes to me with the country, I also want to know the sales channel in each country, how much is the revenue that we have earned. So as per the sales channel and as per the country. In that case, I can always move the sales channel to the columns and keep the country in the rows. Now you can see that as per the country and the sales channel, I am able to get the result. So for Africa and the direct sales channel, this is the total revenue. That is the sum of the revenue. Then for Africa online, different revenue amount, and the retail to Africa, this is the amount. Now total, that is the grand total of all the three, is given in this column. So this is how you get the result from using the column and the rows. Now it doesn't mean that you have to put one in the column and one in the row. You can decide to put both in one place, that is both in the rows, for example. So now it will show just one under the another. Under Africa, you can see direct, online and retail. Under Australia, you can see direct, online and retail. Under Canada, you can see direct, online and retail. So on and so forth, you can keep going down. This is how you can see your pivot table works when it comes to getting your data both in the rows or either ways if you want to put it in the columns. But it will not be very user friendly if you put both in the columns. This is how it will look. It is very difficult to identify what we are talking about. So the best way to use is to show it in the rows and the column. But yes, of course, if you have more data to show, for example, you also want to show the, say, customer name. So in this case, you can put customer name in your rows. You can move sales channel and the country in the column, or you can always put the sales channel and the customer name in. So vice versa, but I would rather put sales channel on the top so it's easier to see now. Direct, these are all the names of the clients. Then I go down, I can see online, these are all the names of the clients. If I go further down, I can see, I'm just going down to see the other part of this, and the retail, these are all the names. Now again, when I was scrolling down, it was very difficult to see each one of them. If I want to make sure that I want to look only for, say, online, it is very difficult to identify where the online is. I can always collapse this by clicking on this small button on over here. But if you had a long list, and finding online would be very, very difficult. In that case, I can go onto that particular column, right click on that column, and decide to collapse or expand it. So as of now, it's all expanded. So I would rather want to say that collapse my sales channel. So what will happen is it will show me everything that is collapsed here. I can also try and collapse the whole field, the entire field. So I can say collapse entire field. If I do that, it will automatically collapse the entire field for me, and I can see now direct, online, and retail collapse. Whichever I want to see now, I can just click on that button to only view for that detail. So this is how it can be very, very useful when it comes to the pivot table. Moving further down, if we are looking at the pivot tables, you can see that there are a lot of things that you can do with the pivot table when it comes to columns, rows, and values. Now, I'm going to keep only the sales channel and the country showing here in the list. And I will want to move sales channel to the column because it's a smaller data. The smaller data would always be good to be put in the channel in the column because it can be viewable in one screen. While the bigger data, I would want to put it in the rows because you can easily scroll down with your mouse, whereas moving or scrolling to the right is a little difficult. So it's always user friendly to use the bigger data in the row labels. Yes, so now if I have to decide, let's see, now you can see the data for direct, online, and retail divided into each country and the sales channel. But tomorrow a manager comes and says, I just want to know the total revenue earned as per each country for the direct sales channel. I don't want to know for online and retail. I can always go and filter the data by clicking on this filter option and select direct only. However, here I can see the direct channel information plus the grand total. I do not want both to be shown. I just want the direct as a grand total to be shown here. In that case, I can move the sales channel. First, I'll remove the filter from here and move the sales channel to the filters. Here I can filter as many times I want, I will not be able to see that column for that filtered data. For example, let me filter for direct and click on OK. Now you can see you can only see the sum for the revenue, but it is only selected for direct because I have filtered it for direct, and you can only see the total revenue for the direct sales channel. Say tomorrow my manager comes and asks me for direct and online. In that case, I will have to click on select multiple items and select both the items, direct and online, and click on OK. Now in the filter, you cannot identify which ones are selected from the look of it. You will have to click on it and see which ones are selected. But in your pivot table report, you can see the only sum of the revenue that is for direct and the online only. So you will not see two columns more, which is online and direct, because that is not what he wants to see. He just wants to see as per the country, what is the sum of the revenue for direct and the online sales channel. He's not bothered about the division. That is when you will use the filter option. So yes, so this is how your pivot table with all these four quadrants that we have learned can be very, very useful to take it forward when you're working on your pivot table. To summarize it, if you have a huge data and you want to summarize it into small one and make your pivot table user friendly and understandable. So now this was one way of creating your pivot table. But there are number of different ways what you can do in the pivot table is. One thing is that you can also change the look of the or the format of the pivot table by clicking on the pivot table and then going on to the design. Here you will see under the pivot table styles, there are a lot of styles that you can pick from. So anything that you like from this list, you can just hover over that particular style and you will see that your pivot table is showing you that style here. See, if I select this black with a pink, it is automatically giving that look on the pivot table. So if you like that, you can just click on that and Excel will accept that pivot table style and you will see that that color has been added to the pivot table. Now this was about how you can add the pivot table with the 4 quadrants. You must have also noticed that when I was creating the pivot table under the insert tab, there was something called as recommended pivot table. But this is only available for 2013 or above version. The lower versions will not have this option available. What is the use of this is when I stay inside the database, instead of now selecting on pivot table, I'll select recommended pivot table. Once I click on the recommended pivot table, you will see that number of different options under the pivot table is given here. So where I had to drag and drop and get the result, that is what not I'll have to do here. See the first one, it shows the bifurcation of or the split of the country as per the sum of the revenue, where we did the same thing but by dragging and dropping. Second option is to split by country, but I can see sum of quantity, that is how much is the product sold. So this sum has been done here. So this is something that I can see here. Now comes is your sum of revenue by sales channel. So as per the sales channel, you can see some data here. So there are a lot of such options that you can find here, which you can look from and decide which one you really want to work on. So your work of trying to get that data every time will be reduced. You can save time by selecting from one of these data that you can see here. Say, for example, if I want to do the first one, I click on OK. It will automatically place in the new window and you will see that your new pivot table is settled here. Now you don't have to drag and drop because Excel has automatically done that for you by using the recommended pivot table. Now go on to design and decide the design that you are looking for your pivot table. So this is how you create a simple pivot table into your database and how these 4 quadrants can be useful. If you have understood this 4 quadrants, your pivot table will become very, very simple to use. Pivot table will replace your functions like SumIF, CountIF, SumIf, CountIF, your sum function, your average function, your max function, your min function. All these functions will be replaced by just using one uh, tool which is called as a pivot table. So it is a very, very useful tool and very important to learn. It gives you a lot of information in just a small summarization of that data. So in the next video, I'm also going to show you how you can make your pivot table dynamic, how you can group your dates into the pivot table, how you can even create a pivot table which is more user friendly, and how you can make some advanced changes onto this pivot table. Like you can also create slicers, you can also create timelines with this pivot table, which will help you to connect different pivot tables onto one database. So this is how you can create your pivot table into your database. Hope you found this useful. Please keep watching for the next videos on the pivot table, which is the advanced part of the pivot table. And thank you for watching this.